Welcome to the Hunt Breakdown 2018. What an epic hunt. 2 bulls down by 10 a.m. opening day of the New Mexico archery season. My lifelong hunting partner, Leroy Chavez, and I are going to share our hunt with you in a way unique only to Blue Collar Elk Academy. You're going to have the opportunity to not only hear a story, but you're going to find out the reasons, the thought process behind everything and every decision that we make throughout this hunt. 6-part series: scouting, the selection of camp, the equipment, the plan, the hunt, and then the haul. You're going to find out the whys and the wherefores for everything that we have done. This is part 1. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunting, brought to you by ElkBros.com, with your host and elk hunting coach, Joe Giglia. You want to hunt elk? They live to hunt elk. Their goal is to share with you what they have learned grinding it out for over 35 seasons, doing what they love. So come on into camp and set a spell. Welcome to Blue Collar Elk Hunters.
Welcome everybody, welcome back. This is the Hunt Breakdown Series 2018, where we're going to talk about our archery elk hunt this year that took place, but we're going to do it in a way that is going to be extremely informative for you guys to help you start building up your database of information. You're not just going to hear a story, you're actually going to get in our heads, and that might work good for Chav here. I don't know if you want to be inside my head. There's a lot of dark holes that could lead to. But this is going to be a 6-part series. We've got the scouting, the camp, the equipment, the plan, the hunt, and then our favorite?
The haul.
The haul, right?
Right.
So, that's, everybody says, man, the hunt is a lot of fun, but after the kill, that's when
the work starts.
That's when the work starts, man. Before we get going too far into this, though, we'd like to thank all of our subscribers that have been subscribing on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, different places out there. And we'd like to ask you to do us a favor and please rate us. Please leave a review. We want to find out how we're doing for you. We are the Blue Collar Elk Hunters. We are your Joe Lunchbox guys that are out there, and we want to make sure that message is getting across, and we're giving you information that you really feel like is working for you. If you have any questions for our weekly Q&A, please go ahead and email us. You can email us at info@elkbros.com. That's ELKBROS.com. Our website is
Blue Collar Elk Academy.
Yeah.
And we'll be announcing the launch pretty soon.
Yeah, that's we're real excited about that. The landing site is just about ready to be up. That's almost there. It's a lot of work and development for the website, but the Elk Academy itself is going to have a lot of information. It's going to have loads of information that, what's great about these podcasts and what's great about the website is you're going to get a lot of free content. You're going to learn. Our goal, we're coaches. We are your elk coaches. And we want to go ahead and teach you, and you're going to get a lot from us out of this. But if you want to get more information, you want to get varied information, in-depth information to help you make your choices out there, that Blue Collar Elk Academy is going to be perfect for you. So we're going to go ahead and get started with Elk Hunt 2018. And what an epic hunt this was.
Right, yeah. Another epic hunt to that.
I tell you, we've had this happen before where we have both taken an animal same day, same herd.
All right. Opening day.
Yeah, we've had one on. I don't think we've ever doubled on opening day before, have we? Mm-hmm. I don't recall that before.
Yeah, I'd have to look back in the logs.
Yeah, but I tell you what, this hunt, it was by 10 a.m. in the morning. This hunt was over, and it was unbelievable. What a great hunt! And we're talking opening day of the archery elk season, so that's usually the early rut that's happening there. And instead of just telling you, the story and the excitement, everything like that, again, we're going to invite you into our thought processes to help start your database. So we're going to cover, first of all, part one is
The scouting. And
That's
it's
right.
so important to get out there and scout a little bit. There have been times where we haven't been able to really get out there for whatever reason. So a lot of times we use that first day as our scouting for the hunt.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's going to be on our hunt anyway. Even if we have done some scouting, a lot of times that first day is putting on some mileage, huh?
Right.
Yeah, but we happen to this hunt, we managed to get it so that everything worked the way the plan went, and it was just one of those good deals. So deciding where to hunt. We like to do most of our scouting in the pre-rut phase. In other words, we're going to be doing that scouting in late August, basically the pre-rut phase of the hunt out there. We already have an idea of where bulls are because just like we're planning to go out here in a couple of days.
Yeah,
right?
we get out there and look for some sheds, and that gives us an idea where the bulls like to hang out, and their cover, their bedrooms.
So we already have that pretty much
Right.
in our head, and so what we want to do is during that late August, that pre-rut phase, is we want to get out and we want to cover some ground. We want to cover as much ground as possible, and most of that's going to be happening in some type of mode of travel, whatever your mode of travel is. If it's horseback, if it's four-wheeler, if it's just in a truck, we're wanting to cover ground. How many hours did we put on the bike?
I'm not sure.
I mean, we were in the saddle from morning till evening
Right.
when we went out there, and covered mile after mile. And we want to go ahead and use all the current routes that are already being utilized. We want to be as least intrusive as possible. In other words, we don't want to, during our scouting phase, going in and start pushing out those groups of elk out of their areas where they're getting comfortable, where they have already some familiarity with where their food is, their water source, their cover. We're not wanting to blow them out. So we're wanting to use the type of trails that people are already using, if that's on a bike, a horse, or a four-wheeler, whatever that is, and cover as much ground. And we're looking for locating certain things, which we're going to talk about. So we've already drawn into a unit at this point. Here in northern New Mexico, we have a lot of units here that we really like in this area, and we happen to draw on one. And so our whole thought process at that time is basically to have a plan A, B, C, and D. Okay, you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So if you find a hot spot or you find a lot of sign in that late pre-rut, and you go and you put all your eggs in and you set up a camp and everything's pretty solid there, and then you find out
Mm-hmm.
no animals,
Right.
which has happened to us before.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, once you get other hunters out there too, things change up a little bit. So you got to have alternatives to that, to what you have listed as your number one priority.
Right, and so we're looking for A, B, C, and D. Most units here in northern New Mexico are what I call big little areas. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of climbing, and there's a lot of areas that are inaccessible to vehicles. You basically have to get out there and walk.
Right, and also they're kind of all surrounded. We don't have vast, huge. I mean, you're not going to see 100,000 acres in a lot of these areas. Some areas are going to be 50,000 acres. Some are going to be 20,000. Some are going to be 40,000. You might have if somebody's hunting in the Valle Vidal unit here in New Mexico, you're talking a couple 100,000 acres there. But other than those really, really vast areas, it's kind of like a big little area. They're surrounded by private property. They're surrounded by highways, different types of access.
Right.
And you know that the elk are in there, and they're pretty much contained. Now, there is some travel, of course, from unit to unit, but we know that they're in there. So what we're trying to do is when we go in and we drive or we do the trails or we're on the bike, we're trying to locate different things that we see that are going to give us an idea where those animals are going to be. So we actually want to figure out which parts are giving us the best elk buffet. All right, the 4 things, water,
Yeah. Food. Any kind of sign out there.
Yeah, are we seeing the sign? With that, and their bedrooms,
Right.
the cover, right?
The cover.
So we want to start putting that into our database. And on this hunt, we must have, like I said, we were out a couple of times in that pre-rut phase, not necessarily getting off and going into those areas. We didn't want to do that. We didn't want to be real intrusive, but we were covering the ground. And what we found out in our area was there were some things that happened before the hunt. Number one, there was a huge fire.
Yeah, real big fire lasted several weeks.
Right.
Actually, in and around the area, we had a lot of fires in northern New Mexico.
In fact, here we had the fire about a half mile from our home, from this spot where we're located right now, and we ended up with about 40,000 acres in this area that was burned.
Right. Yeah, we got evacuated actually for about a week before we come back home.
Yeah. So for all you other people out there in some of these states, I know Colorado went through that quite a bit. Up in Idaho, different places. We know how it goes, and we know how you feel, and hope everything went well for you. We ended up on the better end of it here, and in fact, one of the areas that we decided to hunt in had a fire. We had been bone dry. The previous season, we had about, in an area that we usually get 16 inches of rain, from July until about October 11th, we had 30 inches of rain.
Mm-hmm.
And then
had a lot of rain.
Nothing. No winter, no snow. It just got really, really exceptionally tinder dry. And that's what started the fires that we had during the fire season. So we ended up with a fire in our hunt area. And I tell you what, when you look up there, and at first we were like, oh man.
Yeah, there's landmarks that we can see from our home, to the area where we hunt, and we could see the smoke coming out of one of our favorite areas. It was like, oh no.
Yeah. But so the thing about fire is fire can be both good and it can be bad. It just depends on the intensity of the fire. There's good fires that are what we call healthy fires, and a lot of those fast fires that go through that are kind of hot and fast going through, they just kind of clean up the undergrowth, get rid of a lot of those old branches and stuff like that, but they don't really do a terrible job to all the trees. The trees don't get killed off. It doesn't scorch the ground. We've had a fire a few years back right here near the house that area is still recovering because it basically sterilized the soil. It was so hot.
Yeah, it burned really hot.
So there's good and bad fires. There's also old and new fires. When we decide on areas to hunt, some of the things that we look for in our thought process in this hunt was we had plenty of areas that were old fire zones, and we had a new fire zone. And about 4 weeks before our hunt was up, the monsoons hit. And here in New Mexico, when they hit nice, it's awesome. Mm-hmm. We get a lot of rain. And they hit here, and in talking to firefighters who were out on the restoration, I happen to have a neighbor who's one of those guys, and came back and he's like, man, he said, we just went through the burn, and little green carpet of grass inside there. And this was only just a few weeks after the fire, but the monsoons had hit, and they had already spotted animals feeding inside the fire zone. So we were like,
Yeah, that's quality grass there.
that's good stuff. So we were pretty excited about that. The other thing that we want to look for when we're scouting food source, and that's what we're talking about here, is the fires that happen actually were helping us to have some quality food source. We're looking for quality of grass. Did we have late moisture? Was there early moisture so that we had really, really high grass? There's some years you go in there after a good snow season and grass starts coming up really, really good, and you get some really high grass. And elk are grazers. They compete with cattle for that grass.
Right.
If there's other things that they're wanting, then like acorns, we're looking for an acorn crop. And do we get that every year?
We don't get acorn every year, but sometimes we get a massive amount of acorns. And I know there's some people out there that don't know that elk love those acorns. And a couple of years ago, when Gilbert got a huge bull, and we could talk about that some other time, the acorns were like grapes. I mean, they were huge. They were all over. And a lot of we hunt in an area where there's 3 different types of terrain. We got the lower country with oak brush, and then there's a transition section. Then we got the alpine hunt. And while everybody was leaving camp and going up to the alpine areas, we were going down to the acorns, and we had a lot of success. I think we had there were actually 5 shots
In one morning.
In one morning,
Right.
And Gilbert connected on a
346 bull.
346 bull.
Yeah, beautiful bull.
Beautiful bull, and we had a chance at, gosh, everybody had a shot that day.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, weren't able to connect, but they were down in the acorn.
So 2 bulls were taken that morning. We should have had 3 bulls down.
Right.
A couple of fellas were
And
first time out.
and actually possibly 4 because my bow malfunctioned, and that happens too. So you hunters out there that find some weird stuff happening, it happened.
Oh, a good point too is he's talking about is those acorns that we found were probably where we killed one of those bulls might have been 3/4 half mile from a main camping area. Right. So
and right next to a road, actually, a traveled road.
Yeah. So you don't have to necessarily drive way off to be able to find elk. So that's something to keep in mind right there. So one of the things that we're driving around looking is, man, we're going through areas and we're looking. Are there acorns? What's the grass look like? If there's a burn, what's it look like inside the burn? So this is what we've been taking inside our head. And the next thing that we're thinking about is okay, where the elk are. And we're looking for the presence of elk. Now, make sure you understand that that's not we're not looking for bulls. Again, we kind of know where they've already been hanging out, where they've been doing their thing. And if they haven't been traveling too far from where the cows generally are at, we have a great idea what it's going to be like in September. But what we're looking for is we're looking for the cows. We're looking for a sign of big herds, and it's going to be feast and famine when you see the sign because they are in big groups. So it can look like there's nothing in an area. All of a sudden, man, it's just like trampled with track. Mm-hmm. So if you want hints to how to see that, go to places where it's easier for you to spot sign. Muddy areas around water, okay? Muddy areas inside roads, crossing areas from one feed spot to other areas. Just go and check those and see if you can find that sign. Look for fresh droppings in that area. Remember, though, that just because you're finding them there right now, all you want to know is there's elk in the area, because they can move, and they can move for different reasons, okay? Once that hunting pressure comes in, that could cause a little bit of movement. Now, I caution everybody And we're going to talk a little bit more about backcountry animals and high use areas and how much that hunting pressure affects them. So we'll talk that here in a few minutes. But we're looking for the big groups of cows, looking for sign of those big groups. We're looking for track. We're trying to see that. And you can tell a bull track from a cow track. Now, again, this is something that we're going to be giving you a lot of this information now. On our Elk Academy, we'll show examples of the differences of those as far. If you see rubs from a previous year, if you've hunted this area before and you found rubs in an area, they tend to be the same places, huh?
Yeah, they seem to like the same areas for rubs.
So there's some places, we have one little special little park, and it's nothing, to us it's special because we go in there and it's just a little small park that we find in the middle of a thick wooded area. And every time we go in there every year, in fact, we call it our little hid park, there's always sign in there.
Right. Uh-huh.
In fact, one season I killed a bull right in that small park.
Yeah, just a small little park surrounded by oak brush and piney and juniper probably.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to get to, and they seem to like to go in there.
Right. And it's something that is probably, it's not even 60 yards wide and probably 150 yards, kind of dog legs a little bit, but it's not very big. It's just one of those little small, little oasis, little open area with some grass and stuff amongst really, really thick bedding areas. So again, here's something for you to think about a little bit. Now, the other thing when we're looking where the elk are, where I talked about before, is you want to consider the effects of pressure. And that can have different, it's going to happen differently on those animals from backcountry areas to use areas. And so let me explain what I mean by that. When we went into the Pecos wilderness, and we're off the beaten path, and we're going down into areas where these elk don't see people probably until hunting season, might see an occasional horseman every now and then. Those backcountry areas, those animals don't catch smells, scents, sights, and sounds of humans that often. There are what we call use areas where you get people that are either working cattle all the time or are in there hunting different things from small game to big game all during the season, doing some fishing, doing hiking, doing biking. These are what I call use areas, and the elk are in those areas, and they have a whole different mannerism, or they have a whole different relationship, or they're just not, they don't act the same when they smell, hear, or see a human. I think if you're in a backcountry area and you're a half mile from a group of elk and you have some human scent that comes down and hits that nose, boom,
Yep, they're gone.
they're gone. But I have actually, in all these years, how many times have we traveled with herds to see, the effects that camps have on them, that four-wheelers have on them?
Yeah, a lot of times, that we've scouted, we've been in herds, and there's other people scouting at the same time, and I can remember one time we were in a herd of about 50 cows, a couple of spikes, and we heard a four-wheeler coming up, and we thought, oh, they're gonna just take off. And no, the four-wheeler came probably, I'd say 50 yards to them. They just put their heads up and looked. Four-wheeler turned, kept going, and then went back to feeding. I would say that's probably a use area.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Elk, they didn't get spooked or anything. And I've seen that during the hunt too, because whenever we're lucky and we're able to come up upon a herd without them knowing we're there, and we kind of follow them around till we get the shot we want. There's been a lot of times where four-wheelers come and go, and they never get spooked.
Sure. I've actually Several different times, because we're always we always follow herds. We'll actually get in amongst them. A lot of times we're out there a couple hours before daylight. We like to locate, close the gap, stay off a little bit, wait till daylight, and then start working into the animals. And there's so many times that I've actually stayed with a herd because the bull would be on the other side, and we're just moving, waiting for different opportunities. And I've bedded down with groups. I've followed groups that have gone through people's campsites. I mean, literally 20, 30 yards from a tent, and have watched those elk just break around, go around a camp, and come back together on the other side and keep going the way they want. A lot of times I've seen where a group of elk are coming down and they get spooked by a hunter and they end up splitting off, and they still end up circling and coming back to the direction that they want to go.
Well, they were heading right.
Right. They're either heading to their bedding area, or they're heading to their feed, and they have an idea where they want to go, where they want to be, and that's what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, like you said, one time I actually was on a herd, had bedded down, probably about 30, 35 cows, nice bull. He was on the other side, and I'm just sitting down. I'm perfect with the wind, and I hear a four-wheeler coming. I couldn't see it, but all the elk just kind of raised their head up a little bit, and you could see their ears turning with the sound of it. The bike stopped. A bugle came out, and no response. So it gets back on. Takes off again. Animals never spooked, never boogered. Just let him go on his merry way, and I learned a lot of things from that. In that, there's a lot of times some guys call and they don't get a response, and they think there's no elk in the area, and that's not true. Just because you don't hear elk doesn't mean that they're not there, that they're not necessarily responding to what you're doing. So that's something to keep in mind. If you're seeing sign of animals and you're not getting responses from them, think about differing your strategy, and we'll talk a little bit about those strategies in another podcast. So that's something that you got to think about, backcountry versus use areas, because in those use areas, when that hunting pressure comes in, again, those animals have an idea of where they want to be,
Right.
where they want to eat, where they want to bed, and the hunters don't have as much effect. Now they start really harassing in those areas, and there's bodies in those areas, then those animals might get pushed off, or they might move to a different area. I don't think that they end up doing that very long. I think it's a rotation after a while. We always end up seeing them back in there eventually.
Right. They just rotate back to, where there's less people, less scent maybe.
Right.
But, on these use areas, it's not like the elk are tamed or anything, because, 5 days into the hunt, we'll run into hunters and they haven't seen an elk anywhere, and they're kind of wondering what kind of draw was this. And the funny thing is, they're just around. They just haven't found a way to find them.
Right. They are there. Now, for those backcountry animals, that's not what we were dealing with. So we're dealing with our decision making for this one, and we'll talk about them on another podcast when we do that. So right now, we're thinking about the hunting pressure. So where are the holes going to be if hunters do start putting a lot of pressure? Where are these guys going to dive off into, where they can still have water, where they can still have feed, where they can get plenty of cover? Because those are the things. Now, rut is going to be number one on their priority. That's number one. But they got to eat, and they've got to drink, and they're most likely going to find places that are next to the type of what we call their bedrooms. The places, those thick timber areas where they can go and stay cool during the day, where they're up high on ridges generally, and they want to get up to a point where thermals are coming up to them, probably about 2/3 of the way, not very far from the top up there, and that way they have escape routes going over. They can catch all the scents coming up, and they have different ways of protecting themselves by view. So we want to know where those are. If they're not in A, where will they be? Will it be in B? Will it be in Plan C? Will it be in Plan D? And why? And we'll talk about those. Our A area that we picked out this year. We ended up our A area, because water was everywhere because of the monsoons, that consideration was gone. Yeah, they're going to go to water, but there were plenty of opportunities in a lot of different places. It wasn't like
Yeah, there's water everywhere.
Yeah,
So,
they were running down the roads.
yeah, that wasn't a problem for them.
So we decided our A area was going to be the new growth from the fire. We thought that was going to be a really, really inviting area, so that was going to be our Plan A. It bordered real thick bedding areas that had a lot of sign. We saw a lot of travel sign in that area. There were a lot of dark timber still that bordered where it had been opened up from the fire, and they had the grass. And those areas gave them that protection from pressure. So it was kind of a little bit of ways. It had good food, had good cover, and had, for us, we felt like that was going to be our Plan A. Our B, C, and D areas had been identified. Again, water was everywhere, so that wasn't the issue. One of our areas, our B area, was an area that had previous burns in it, because we've had numerous fires up in this area.
Right.
And anytime you've had a burn, it opens up that canopy, it lets the food out. There's all kinds of growth in there, and if you can find those spots that have bedding areas with those large open canopy areas where those animals can go in, that's prime time right there as well. A lot of times, if they're in deep canyons coming up to a burn area, or if they're on ridges coming down to a burn area, there's going to be water there, but again, that wasn't an issue. Our other one, we did find acorns.
Yeah, we did find some acorn. Not a great crop, but a good crop. So we knew eventually they would wander to that area. So that was in the back of our minds, but we had already selected where we're going to start.
And these weren't the same elk either. The ones that were staying up in what we called our A area was a whole different group of elk than what we were going to find in B, C, or D.
Yeah, there's different group elk in different areas. So
yeah, so that's basically how we planned it. Even though the crop was sporadic, we had one area which so A ended up being a high burn area for us. B ended up being old burn with a lot of bedding area around it. C was pretty much, it was more flat type area with a lot of interspersed pine and some oak brush that was providing acorns that we saw in there.
Right, yeah, and shelter.
and good grass.
Right.
And then our D area was going to be the thick oak brush. That was going to be our D area. So that was our scouting phase. We're taking all that into account. Oh, there's one thing I left out. In New Mexico, there's a lot of cattle grazing, cattle leases that happens on state land and on national forests. So another thing that we were looking at is competition. If the cattle are really grazing that grass down and competing in some areas, then the elk might be in other places where that grass is a little bit thicker. And where I guide, we do tests every year. Our biologists, we have terrific biologists out there, and they actually fence off different areas to find out how much the elk are grazing down the grass, and it would really surprise you at how much they feed on that grass. It's a main staple for them, especially if they don't have those acorns. They're not so much competing, even though they will. There's different things like we were watching them now this time of year. They were eating the bark off the aspen.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, if you see those marks on aspen trees, those are generally elk that have been munching out there during the winter time. There were several aspen that just fell down and they stripped it completely. They're always finding, they have different types of food that they eat. and aspen is probably one of their favorite. It seems like their favorite.
Oh, especially during those winter months, right?
'Cause we're already seeing some green grass coming up, and they were feeding on those also. But yeah, we spent a few minutes looking at an elk just eating the bark.
Yeah, I think we stalked in probably about 70 yards on
Yeah,
him.
we got him pretty close, and you could see his head go up and just start
Yeah,
chewing on the bark.
Yeah, he was just reaching up and peeling it off up there as his food source. And this was inside the burn area because what happened of the heat, it actually caused some of that bark to separate, caused some splits, and it made it easier for them to get the bark off the trees. So
Barbecued bark.
yeah, yeah,
That's what it looked like, you know.
yeah, it really was.
Yeah, but that's the aspen trees.
Yeah. So that's mainly what was inside our heads. That was our scouting trip. Those are the things that we're looking at. Again, we're looking for food. Okay? We want to find out, is it the grass? Is it acorns? What are they feeding on at that time? Water, if it's a dry year, can be critical. That wasn't the case this year, so that was kind of scratched off for us. Sign, we were looking for the sign, and we're looking for areas showing where the cows are. Where the cows are is where the bulls are going to be. Okay, where the bulls are at that time, those guys that are bachelored up, they're going to be moving. They're going to be taking off. So you want to know where the cows are. That's your secret right there. Okay, and we're looking for cover. We're looking for those thick areas in the bedrooms that are adjacent to the other things that we're looking for. They have all of that. They really feel good. The animals are going to talk a lot. They're going to do different things, and you're going to have a successful hunt. So that's what was in our plan for the 2018 hunt. Next on the list in our next part of our series, we're going to be talking to you guys. Now that we've got that part, we're going to be talking about the camp. So we hope to see you on part 2 of the series. And from Chav and Joe, your coaches, see you next time.
Peace.